And I am going to be one of the facilitators for this discussion. You'll also see Phoebe Morad on our call. She's our executive director. And Phoebe gets to take a well-deserved break, but she's here too. And we also have Vicar Anna Czarnik-Neimeyer on our call, who will be hosting a little bit later. And I'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself. But I just wanted to say, welcome. Again, thank you for being here. Today we're going to get to talk about climate resilience. And Vicar Anna is going to get to take us through some of her own ministry experience with Design for Peace from the Southwest, which is a ministry of the Southwest Washington Synod. Anna is a dear friend and a colleague of mine. We get to actually work together in person, which is something I normally don't get to do, but occasionally we have seen each other in the flesh. And I am really excited about the ministry that Design for Peace gets to do. And Anna even gets to talk about climate resilience. And I feel like that's a word I heard a lot before I entered this faith and nonprofit space. And I have not always known what it means. So I'm excited to learn more with you. And if you feel like you've just heard that word tossed around, you're not alone. And we'll get to dig into that a little bit more. Before we start our call, which will be deeply invested in the land that we're on and the land that we get to be in community with, I want to talk a little bit about the indigenous keepers of this earth, and we're going to do a land acknowledgement. As is our practice on all of our calls, I encourage you to put the indigenous peoples of the land that you're currently on as I read out our Lutherans Restoring Creation land acknowledgement. Our land acknowledgement, because we're from so many different places, will be a more broad one that will sort of speak to Turtle Island or modern day North America as a whole. So feel free to center yourself in the place that you're at right now. As we live, work, and worship in the land that is now called the United States, Lutherans Restoring Creation recognizes that we do so on land that was stolen from indigenous peoples. As we are called to restore creation, we are also called to restore right relationship with one another. As we join this holy vocation of loving our neighbor, we honor all our indigenous siblings who have been companions of the lands, waters, and beings of Turtle Island since time immemorial. We charge our community to learn more about the original and continuous stewards of the land upon which we exist. We lament legacies of violence, cultural genocide, and displacement of indigenous communities, committing ourselves to hearing and speaking the truth of that history and its ongoing effects. May we gather faithfully in mind, body, and spirit so that we may mend what has been broken and embodies Christ's gospel of abundant life. Thank you. All right. Well, without further ado, I am going to let Vicar Anna introduce herself and tell us a little bit what she's all about.
Thank you, Gabrielle. I'm curious if I can have the slideshow up at the same time.
For sure. I will get that up.
I love a visual. First of all, I would love to see all of your faces, even if it's just for the beginning. So I'm going to invite people, if you can turn on your video so I could just see you and we can acknowledge that we're all actual real people that are coming from actual real land and actual real places, and we're not just robots, and that we just got to hold on to it. We just got to hold on to that reality. So I'm just going to wave to you, and I would love to just like see a little wave back. Hi, Kristen. Hi, Linda. Hey, Bren. Hi, Thor. Hi, Johnson family. Hi, Pam, Alicia, Henry, Cindy, Doug, Kia, or Kaya, Chuck, Robert, Kathy, Phoebe, Gabrielle. It's good to be together. It's good to be together. Well, as Gabrielle said, I'm going to do a little introduction, but I would love to know the context of who's in this space. That's okay. So I'm going to invite you to enter in the chat your name and your pronouns. If you belong to a church or in a context of a church, your church's full name, don't give me the acronym, just the name of the church is great, and the location of your church. Are you in the US? Are you in Canada? What's the state and city? And then also, what brought you to this webinar today? That's going to really help me as we shape our space today. Okay. So welcome. Let me take a look at this beautiful chat. Okay. We've got Robert coming in from Philadelphia or from Pennsylvania. We've got Henry coming in from Alaska. We've got Pam, other people coming in from Bellevue, Washington. Okay, from Washington. We've got Wendy from Wisconsin, Reedsburg. Got, is it Kaya or Kia? I would like to honor actually how you pronounce it.
Kia, like the
Kia. Thanks.
car.
Awesome. Kia. Thanks for helping me understand. Okay, Alicia. Hi, Alicia. My neighbor in Tacoma. Leah and Roger. Chuck is coming from South Dakota. We've got folks in St. Paul. People coming from Bothell in Washington. We have my mom who's coming in from Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. We've got folks in Everett. And what are people saying about why they're here? They want to learn about what climate resilience is. You're in the Midwest, you're in the East, you're in the South, you're in the Pacific Northwest. Chair of my green team and always looking for new things to learn and inspire care of creation. Awesome. Well, it's so nice to meet you all. My name is Anna Czarnik-Neimeyer and I use she and her pronouns. My context is that I live in Tacoma, Washington. And I live on the land of the Puyallup people. I live across the street from Pacific Lutheran University, so I'm actually in Parkland, Washington. And I grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up in Northeast Wisconsin, about 3 hours north of Chicago. I'm affiliated with the ELCA, and I am a vicar, which means I am in between the completion of seminary and the ordination process in the Southwestern Washington Synod of the ELCA. And I work with Design for Peace, which we'll talk about in a moment. And what brought me to this webinar, or why do I care about climate resilience? Actually, let's take down the slideshow for a second so I can see your faces while I share why I care. Thank you, Gabrielle, also for being our tech genius. I care about climate resilience because I care about resilience. As I've gone through challenging, hard things in my life, the people around me have held me, and I would not have been able to survive those times without resilience. And we've all had to be resilient in our lives. I've experienced health challenges and housing challenges and all of those things. We've all had to be resilient in our lives. And what we know is that we're going to keep needing to be resilient, and even more so as the climate changes. So I enter this work because I care about people, and I care about people that care about issues. And one of the issues they care about is the environment. But I also care about creation as well. So I care about all of creation, but if I were to really name a heart why, it's because I care that other people have resilient ways to survive and thrive in the ways that I have experienced. So that's part of my why, and we're going to talk about your why or your self-interest later, because you might be wondering, I thought she was going to say that she likes birding, or I thought she was going to say that she loves hiking, which I do like, but just sharing the real with you. So let's go back to the presentation, please. And I'm just going to share here. Okay. So let's go to the slide about the next slide, please. I would love to hear from folks in the chat. What is a special or a specific natural setting that you feel connected to and that is special to you? And as you think about that, I'm going to share for you what mine is. So this is a picture. That's not me, but this is the actual picture of an actual place. This is Long Lake, outside of Shawano, Wisconsin. And this is the boathouse at the camp where I grew up attending and then worked at. It's called Imago Dei Village. And my memory of this lake called Long Lake is sitting just like that kid is sitting on the boathouse on Thursday nights of camp and watching canoes come in that are holding candles. And it's called the candlelight service. And the canoes come in on Long Lake and pull up. And then that's how we started our Vespers service. And so that lake, that boathouse on Long Lake, is an important place and a special setting that is I feel really connected to. So I'm going to invite you to type in the chat, what is a special place or a setting that you feel connected to? A small series of ponds in a local industrial park, trails around Holden Village in the mountains of Washington, places in Maine, Camp Pioneer on Lake Erie, a nearby nature preserve where there are fireflies that gather, the Oregon coastline, Acadia National Park, walking in the woods. Beautiful. A big leaf maple outside of your house, Gabrielle, that brings you so much joy. I love it. I love it. I love it. So now for our sake, oh, we have even more. There's camps. Lots of people are saying camps. We're part of that for them. A lake, a beautiful trail in Iowa. So the reality is we all have these places that we love and that we care about. And as we do this grounding, what I'm going to invite you to do is to imagine that space. So you can either keep your eyes open or close your eyes. And I'm going to invite you to imagine that you are there in that place, in that special place. Imagine, what does it look like for you? As you look around and swivel your head, what do you see? What does it smell like? What are the sounds you hear while you're there? Now I'm going to invite us to each just take three deep breaths as we are in that space. Just breathing in through our nose, out through our mouth, in through our nose, out through our mouth. Last one, in through our nose, out through our mouth. And the last thing before you open your eyes, I'm going to invite you to do is to imagine that this space that's so special for you is well cared for and that it's well stewarded, it's healthy, and it's thriving. And as you open your eyes and we transition to coming back together, what I want us to offer and to hold on to is offer gratitude to our God, to our creator for these natural spaces that we are really part of, both that we steward and that are part of us and that have shaped us and held us. And then to imagine a world where those spaces will be healthy and well for years and years to come and we can return to them, people we love can return to them. And that's what we're going to put into the world. And that's one of the ways that we'll practice climate resilience together. So you just did climate resilience, actually. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. Thank you for sharing those special places. So what's the organization that I'm part of? It's called Design for Peace. It's a resource for faith communities in this region. We're connected to the Southwestern Washington Synod of the ELCA. And what we do is we nurture an ecology of peace. And by peace, we mean the faith-based kind of peace that is shalom, which is really peace plus justice. We nurture an ecology of peace in Cascadia, which is the region I live in, by accompanying communities in place-based discernment, design, and experimentation. So that's design for peace. And what I want to share with you is that design for peace, um, that design for peace does a number of things. We're going to talk mostly about climate resilience um, as a cohort that's going to be coming up. I'm going to share some case studies with you about us, and you can imagine and dream how that might be possible in your context. So we're a place-based context. We're not a national program, and we probably will never be a national program because we do place-based organizing. So you can decide how you want to do organizing in your place. We gather cohorts of churches working on land stewardship. So churches, as they discern how to repurpose their buildings and land. So that's the discernment element. We run cohorts of ecumenical congregations doing that work. And as congregations have been in that discernment phase, what has bubbled up naturally is that congregations are discerning that they want to do climate resilience with their space. So what we are now doing is gathering together a design team. So again, discern, design around climate resilience. So there'll be a series of congregations who are in the design phase. They're not jumping right to experimentation. They're designing together how their church community is going to be a hub of climate resilience. And I'm going to finally get to what I mean when I say climate resilience after this, but actually the upfront is really important to ground us. We also lead what's called Preaching Peace, which is a cohort of local clergy and leaders who do tech studies together through the lens of shalom, which is peace and justice. So as we've been sensing this desire and need to move into the space of how churches can be unique supporters of their communities as climate changing, we've needed to land on what is it specifically that we mean by climate resilience. I'm going to have us jump 2 slides ahead, Gabrielle, please. So we're starting from a really simple premise. This is not rocket science, although scientists are pretty cool. I've met a rocket scientist and I respect them, but this is not rocket science. We're starting from a really simple premise that we're in this moment where the climate is changing and there's increased risk of disaster. But with our neighbors and our communities, we're connected. And this connection gives us rise to hope and imagination, and that's towards a vision of peace. So the question is, what if we could withstand and respond to and strongly recover from the challenges that are ahead together? What if we could do more than bounce back from disasters, but actually bounce forward so that we can, ahead of time, cultivate communities where we can eradicate some of the inequalities that are at the heart of the climate crisis? And what if we did this for one another and for future generations? So this is the vision of resilience that we're talking about. It's a big vision. So what would our communities look like if they were more resilient? At Design for Peace, we see resilience in at least 3 dimensions. The first one I'll talk about, is from the material and physical level. So solar panels, radios that are available in the midst of a disaster, resilient gardens on campus, solar batteries that are available, air filters, air conditioning and heating. The physical and material things that we're gonna need as the climate changes, right? But we know that that's, as Christians or as faith-based people, we know that the physical and material elements are not the only things that we need, right? What we also need is spiritual and emotional support. So mental health support and also faith-based and spiritual support, dealing with the theological reality of a climate catastrophe or climate change, which is what we're in. So that would be services or tech studies or access to faith-based therapists or therapists in general. And the third part, which is social and relational, I want to tell a very short story, which is that In the 90s, there was a heat wave, and we can know what that's like, right? Some of us are in a heat wave right now. In the 90s, there was a heat wave in the south side of Chicago, in Illinois. And in the south side of Chicago, there were two communities that were really similar in demographics, really similar in the resources that they had access to, really similar in their population. But one of those communities lost more people to death by heat than the other community. And a researcher went in and wanted to determine what was the difference between these two communities. They had access to the same resources. They had, they were similar communities and health levels, things like that. And the main difference is that one set of communities checked on each other during the heat wave, and one had a less strong social and relational network. So the checking on people, the social and relational piece, saved people's lives. So all of us have a different way into thinking about climate resilience, but the reality is that we need all three things. And what churches sometimes can do, and why churches, what churches can sometimes do well is the material and the physical. They've got food banks, maybe they can dole out air filters, maybe you've got charging stations, maybe you have heating or cooling to shelter people. Churches, in theory, can also do really good spiritual and emotional work. That's some of what we say is our bread and butter, right? It's what we offered. But one thing that we're noticing and hearing that churches can get better at is the social and relational element outside of their walls. If you had radios or water or heating and cooling, and you had beautiful services that you could offer, but nobody trusted that congregation in your neighborhood, or nobody had the relationships, nobody knew who your pastor was, had never been in that church before, and wouldn't be sure if they're welcome, then you're not going to be able to provide the material, physical, spiritual, and emotional elements. And a lot of churches are grappling with that reality and wondering, as the climate changes, what area, if all of them or maybe some of them, they need to work on. So for us, from a sacred perspective, we believe that this earth is a gift from our Creator, and we are part of creation. We're meant to care for it and for each other. And I want to go to the next slide so that I can talk about this kind of from an organizing perspective. I'm learning from various organizers right now, and this piece comes from Reverend Brandon Rencher, who's a UMC pastor, United Methodist pastor in North Carolina, and he works with faith and leadership. One of the principles of organizing is being able to identify people's self-interest, their why, WHY. And we all have different whys, and that's okay. Your reason why you do something, your reason why you get involved with what you get involved with, why you give your money to what you give your money to, why you give your time in the places that you do. And we're not saying that one of these self-interests is more or better than the other. We're just saying that people act on self-interest. And that's not a bad thing. It might be that might be a really philanthropic self-interest. But let's talk about the three areas of self-interest and how they relate to climate resilience. The first one is meaning. So your faith, your family, your genealogy, and your theology. When I first started doing climate resilience work, this was my entry point. That I believed as a person of faith that this was my work to do, that this was my planet to connect with, and I was meant to be a steward of that, and I believed that it was wrong, values-based wrong, that our earth was being denigrated. So that was where my entry point was, meaning. You might have your own meaning or your theological reasons. Another piece is recognition. What's the legacy that you want to leave, and for whom? Maybe I want my kids to be able to go to the same camp that I went to when I was young, and maybe that's part of my reason for wanting to save that camp. Or it was really meaningful to me, or I want to be known as somebody who really cared about the earth. I want to win the Aldo Leopold Award. And that's, I think, a really honest thing to say. And a lot of our churches, if they're having fear of closing, there's something here, there's something really important to name here about legacy. They don't want to be the generation that closed their church. They want to be known. They don't want that to be their legacy. And they want for their church to survive for future people because it's been so meaningful to them. That's legacy. And then we've got preservation. What would living well look like to you? Do you have enough food? Do you have clean air to breathe? Are you able to be safe in your day to day? Do you have a community that you love that works well with you? What is your well-being like? What would living well look like for you? And as I did more climate resilience work, I realized that I thought that I was going in on a meaning level, or maybe that's how I entered. But my self-interest actually ended up looking like preservation. And what do I mean by that? The water levels aren't rising around me. I have access to clean air. There's smoke in Washington, but I have access to that. The self-preservation piece for me with climate resilience is organizing with other people so that I don't dwell in despair. And that actually is a real piece of self-preservation, of spiritual and mental health and all of that well-being that I think is really important for people to name. So even if we're not entering this from a point of I need to organize around climate because my family lives on an island and that island is sinking, we might be doing climate resilience work from a basis of self-interest related to self-preservation because otherwise we would live in despair, or we need a community to be around us as we're in this time, or I need to look to my left and my right and know that I've got a community around me that's going to be with me as we're entering this scary time of climate change. So if we had more time, I would have us do an activity around your self-interest for why you care about this work, why you sign on to LRC calls, and why you're on the green team for your church. We don't have that time right now, but an invitation is for you to think about that. And why? Because people act on self-interest. I care about this and I'm acting on my own self-interest to do this webinar and to do this work because of my self-preservation. And when you know another person or another entity's self-interest, then you can organize with them. And my self-interest might be different than Gabrielle's self-interest. But if we have a common issue that serves both of our self-interest, then we can organize together. And there's not a value-based plus or minus to saying, you know what, my self-interest is legacy. But if we're really honest about what our self-interest is, then we can move forward together. So I think what I want to say with climate resilience is understanding your own self-interest will also help for you to listen to other people's self-interest related to climate resilience. Let's go back one slide and then we're going to have some time to talk. What's interesting and what I've been noticing throughout this year of doing one-to-ones with people and trying to listen for self-interest is that depending on the self-interest of what's bringing somebody to the issues of climate resilience, they're going to enter it at a different place. So if someone's self-interest about climate resilience and climate is around legacy, they may want to preserve land or preserve their church or create a rain garden so that they can be known and so that something can be preserved for them over time. And they might be more likely to enter into the physical and material element. I don't know this for sure, but this is my working theory as I'm functioning with this climate resilience trinity thing, and then also trying to pay attention to self-interest. Because this is live, folks. This is like the conditions are changing all the time, right? Last week there wasn't a heat wave. This week there is a heat wave. Robert knows what I'm talking about. I can see his face being like, yeah, that's right. So depending on your self-interest, you might enter climate resilience from any one of these three places. I'm entering it from the spiritual, emotional, and social relational places. The reality is that we as people and we as institutions need all three of these things. And I might feel frustrated. I might feel like, wait, there are climate change migrants, climate refugees coming up from Mexico and coming from the Pacific Islands. Like, why aren't we focusing more on them? Well, that's the self-interest that's related to me. Another person might say, I really want for there to be hiking trails at Holden Village for time immemorial, and I want to protect that land from being sold. And that's maybe more about legacy. But the reality is, we don't have to have the same reasons for doing climate resilience. We just have to have our own self-interest and reasons, and then we can organize together. So let's go on to the next couple of slides. So I just want to share a little bit about, now I've shared some pieces about climate resilience and what is it. I've shared some pieces about self-interest and organizing principles. I'm just sharing, this is just a screenshot from our website. So we name the realities of systems of oppression and marginalization, meaning that as the climate changes, some people are disproportionately affected. If you live in a tent and it's smoky outside, you're not going to be able to breathe. That's just where it's at. If you're a Pacific Islander and you farm and the water is too salinated because the ocean is starting to encroach on your land, you're not going to be able to farm. You're not going to be able to do your native practice. So this is disproportionately affecting some people more than others. So what we want, God's vision for the world, is a vision of shalom, justice and peace functioning together. So we want to not only survive and have enough clean water after a hurricane hits, but we also want to thrive in liberation and joy. This is a big dream. This is a big gospel dream. And we need everybody to be part of this big gospel dream. So let's go to the next slide. So I've shared with you what this looks like in our context. This doesn't need to be what it looks like in your context, but the thing that we organize around is land. We know that churches are the second largest, after the federal government, churches are the second largest landowners in the country, churches. And so what we have, the resource that we have is land and buildings. And if we're going to have an impact and be climate resilient, then the place that we're choosing to start from is land and buildings. You might choose to start from someplace else based on your one-to-ones you have with people and the self-interest that they have. But our churches in our area, I don't know about yours, are interested in not closing, and they're interested in sticking around, and they're interested in remaining relevant. So the way that we're meeting churches' self-interest and the interest of our organization, justice and peace, is through climate resilience. So for us, we're gathering together at a table, which is just a grouping of practitioners who want to design around climate resilience in their church context. Let's go to the next slide. So part of our organizing strategy for that is to try to get to know the people that are in our context. And how do we do that? Well, we can only do so many physical one-to-ones. Part of how we chose to do it was by hosting a series of webinars, and you can find all these webinars on the Design for Peace website. Webinars that invite conversation and give really high quality information. Yeah, you can keep going through them. Really high quality information that relates to climate resilience through different lenses. So we had it through solar, we had it through indigenous sovereignty, we had it through talking about trees. The next one is about food. And in each case, we invited a practitioner who's doing work locally here in our area, in the Tacoma area, on these areas. And they're not all faith-based people. In fact, 3 of them were not faith-based practitioners, but we have a common self-interest so we can work together. And part of our organizing strategy was to offer really high quality educational content, which is great. But the strategy behind that is the webinar signups. The people that sign up for these webinars are the people in our area, in our region, that care about climate and climate resilience. And we want to know them and we want to hear from them. We want to learn their self-interest. We want to know if we can work together. So I'm just lifting the curtain on what our organizing strategy has been, to be able to know who's in our area, who cares about this, why do they care about it? And then also we can offer some really great content and you can access that content. Let's go to the next slide. So my question, and then we'll open it up for broader questions, is how resonant or energized do you feel about doing climate resilience work? Now that you know, like, what do I mean by climate resilience? How energized or resonant do you feel about doing climate resilience work in your faith community? You need to type in the chat. 1 is not very resonant or energized, and 5 is energized, resonant, and ready to be part of more. Okay. I'm seeing 3. I'm seeing 3. I'm seeing lots of good 3s, a 2, a 4, a 3, a 4. Great. We got some 1s, and that's fine. Not totally ready. Great. So part of this is just in your own church community, I'm still hesitant at a 3. So some of what you might want to talk together after this event or to do some self reflection on is why you feel like you're at the number that you're at. And if this is the area that you want to work with. And if so, what is your self-interest? And what might be the self-interest of people that want to do this with you? Because it might be different. So let's go back to the self-interest slide before I close my presentation portion. Thanks, Gabrielle. It's a couple back. So here's the climate resilience piece that we talked about. And then the next slide is self-interest. Are you in it for the meaning? Are you in it for the recognition? Are you in it for the preservation? And this is a neutral statement, by the way. If you want your children to be able to live and work on the land that you did and have a beautiful, that's legacy. So great. Let's keep going. We can boop forward. Gabrielle is so awesome. Thank you. So let's actually go to the next one. I'm going to share a little bit of piece there. Actually, we can close the slideshow. So here's my question for you. I'm going to type it in the chat. As you were going through this presentation or hearing me talk in this presentation, and we did that activity together, what do you notice? What do you wonder? I'm going to give you 30 seconds before we have people raise their hands or type in the chat for those of us who need a moment to process or write to jot down some notes. So I'm going to keep some time. I'm going to keep a minute as we discern this question, as you write and think. As we're going through this presentation, I'm not asking you to agree with 100% of it, by the way. This is one way of approaching climate work and green work. But thinking about what do you notice and what do you wonder? So 30 more seconds about. Okay. For those of us who need to think, I'm sorry that I can't give you a longer think, but you can keep thinking about it, and then you can contact Gabrielle and Phoebe. So we're going to send you into breakout groups of 3 or 4 for, what do you think? 10 minutes? We got 20 minutes left, so 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think we'll do, probably 10, and then we'll come back for our closing benediction.
Awesome. Okay. You're going to be sent into groups. You're going to talk. What do you notice? What do you wonder? You're responsible for making sure that everybody in your group gets a chance to talk. And I encourage you to have the phrase WAIT, wait, why am I talking, in mind. So make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk in your group. What do you notice? What do you wonder? We'll see you in 10 minutes.
Oh.
You have to hit join room if you can join room and want to. And oh, Kathy, I need to make sure both of your faces go to the same room. Hold on.
Hello.
Kathy, can you just hit, let's see, where did I put you? You're in room 1. Okay, so both of you have to go to room 1. Hopefully that worked. Kathy, do you see a button that says join?
Okay.
Let's see. It's disconcerting to see both sides of your face. So let's, Kathy, do you see a blue button anywhere on your screen that says join? Oh, let me pause.
From two brave souls.
Love you.
What did you notice and what did you wonder? Now, here's the trick. You're going to be reporting out what another person said. So you're going to be speaking and reporting from another person. But before you report on that, I want you to just do a real quick check with that person in the chat if you can share what they shared. So you can ask for their consent before sharing about theirs.
By the way, I also noticed that none of us came back muted. So if you have weird things going on in the background, be sure to mute.
So you're going to be reporting on what someone else said, but check your chat right now because someone might be asking you if you can report on them. Does that make sense to folks? Can you give me a little nod or a thumbs up? Okay. So I'm looking for 2 people who have something to share that they heard in their group and also have consent from that person to share. So who has that?
I have a feeling Kathy isn't looking at her chat. And since she's my cousin, Kathy, is it okay if Gabrielle shares? Okay,
I
big
see a
nod.
nod.
Great. Okay, let's hear it. What did you hear?
I heard a story that was really encouraging to me from Kathy's congregation. And we had a great discussion about how relationship became really important in climate resilience. Is that there was a time when their church was able to house some people who were living on the streets. And as their congregation was about to have a heat wave, and it sounds like it didn't quite break, I think I'm understanding that, it gave them relationships and names and faces to say, we need to check in with these people. And luckily it has a happy ending and they were able to be housed elsewhere. But how important that is, because when we don't know names and faces, then just like your Chicago heat wave story.
Yeah, that's right.
People need to be checked in with.
That's right. Okay, let's give Gabrielle and Kathy some thumbs up or jazz hands or gratitude. Okay, Chuck said that I could share, but I'm not going to count among the 2. I'm going to just share really briefly that I learned from Chuck that there's somebody at Utah State, Leanna DeJong, who's doing her PhD thesis or her PhD dissertation on churches that own land and how they're managing that land, particularly ecologically. And that's of major interest to me and the work that we do. So thank you, Chuck, for sharing that. Okay, do we have one more person that would like to share out and has permission? Thor or Tor.
Yes. Wendy is from Wisconsin. I'm from the Seattle area. Wisconsin is changing. Seattle is changing blindingly fast in our climate. And I think we both feel that the need to make this a wider discussion to include more people. Because I know anything about the faith community, we're good about connecting people, inviting them for a meal,
Mhm,
sharing views.
mhm.
Because after this last election, I went around and talked to people, and I found strikingly different views.
Yeah.
You go by age, you go by
Right.
income, and it's
So
like,
a meal could be climate resilience. Hosting a meal to be talking with your neighbors could be climate resilience.
we have a problem with just community at this point. There's so
Right.
many isolated people.
That's
You
it.
solve that, you are in a lot better position to talk about anything.
Beautiful.
But there's all these other things that are bearing down. And
That's
I mean,
right.
my issue is you got an elephant outside the room and nobody seems to want to talk about it.
That's it. So we're right there. And we're talking into a context. It's worth saying today that some of you are coming to us in a heat wave. Some of you are coming as maybe veterans who remember a time like this when you were thinking about the possibility of war. Some of you are coming from having a newly elected bishop in your synod, like mine. So let's just name the context in this particular time and place, and that we all have a role to play. And I believe in you, and I need you. Not only do I believe in you, but I need you in this work. I'm so grateful that you're here. Let's close with a benediction if we're able to bring up the slideshow. So this benediction comes to us from a movement worker, Dolores Huerta, who was an organizer with food workers. She's a labor organizer. She's a feminist activist. She's She's an activist for immigration rights and LGBTQ rights, and food worker rights, which is intimately connected with the environment. And then here we have a beautiful icon by the religious artist Kelly Lattimore, and there's her icon of the parable of the mustard seed. What the kingdom of God is like is what Torah is talking about. These dinners, these things that we can move and connect and grow together, and it can start from something very small. And that I'm almost getting emotional, y'all, talking about this. We have what we need. The resources are in our faith traditions, and we can use them, and we can imagine something that's really beautiful that could be possible, just like this icon. So this quote is a quote from Dolores Huerta, and I'm going to invite us to unmute and to go into benediction, to sending each other and us forth. And here's the thing. We all know that when you say something at the same time on Zoom, it doesn't all happen at the same time. And it's actually chaos and cacophony. And that's actually what we want and need right now. We need so many voices calling for peace, calling for justice, calling for climate change, climate action, that there's a cacophony of voices blessing one another. So I'm going to invite you to go off mute, to unmute, and for us to say this benediction together. I'm going to give you a second to unmute. And on the count of 3, we're going to read together this quote from Dolores Huerta, the every moment. Can we do that? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Every
moment is an organizing opportunity.
Every
person is a
Potential
potential
activist.
every minute a chance to change the world. Segue.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being together today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicar Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.